Last summer, I was invited by the Tank Theater in New York City to take over their Instagram account for 24 hours. The Tank is a really cool organization, and I was happy to do it. During the 24 hours that I was in control of their Instagram account, I asked people what they wanted to see me do with it. And one person suggested that I go live and rank every movie I've ever seen in my life, from worst to best. This is me doing that. So, we got to start with the worst movie I've ever seen. And I'm going to say the worst movie I've ever seen is Avatar by James Cameron. I'm picking that a little bit to be provocative. You know, if I saw some like piece of shit student film when I was in college where there was like the boom in every shot, does that count as a worse movie than Avatar? You know? I'm saying that movie is better than Avatar. I'm saying the worst movie I've ever seen ever is Avatar by James Cameron. And part of why I think it's so bad is because I was disappointed. When I saw that movie in theaters, and I remember sitting down before it started and thinking to myself, okay, this is going to be in 3D. I think what I'm about to see is like a turning point in the history of cinema. That's how people were talking about Avatar. This was like one of the first mainstream 3D movies that was not like a 3D gimmick movie. I mean, that's how people talked about Avatar in the run-up to Avatar. It was that James Cameron was going to sort of reinvent the state of the art, and he was going to show that 3D is not like a gimmicky thing. It's not like something they use at like theme park movies. It's like a work of art thing that people do to do cinema. That's how people talked about Avatar, and that's what was on my mind when I sat down in the movie theater to watch Avatar. And I believed the hype. I have to spend some time on this. I took it at face value that what I was about to see was gonna like change the course of human history. Hold on, different phones ringing. We got to deal with this. Got to deal with this. Got to deal with the phone ringing while I'm on Instagram Live. Hey, guess what? Okay, sorry about that. Okay, sorry, we're back. Crisis averted. I sat down to watch Avatar in a movie theater because I was thinking that what I was about to see was going to be a turning point in the history of film. I believed that. That's what people said James Cameron was about to do, and I took it at face value. And some of you probably think that's dumb. Or that I was dumb. And I just want to say that's not true. It's like a completely realistic thing to think at the dawn of Avatar that movie was going to be a game changer, because I take James Cameron very seriously. It's like very easy to believe that James Cameron is the kind of person who would make something that seems kind of like cheap entertainment, like the 3D gimmick, and then turn that into a beautiful masterpiece. That is something James Cameron has done. And we're going to hop around the list of movies a little bit, because I'm now going to skip to the top of my list. Some of the best movies I've ever seen are James Cameron movies. I'm talking about Terminator 1 and Terminator 2. And I just want to say that when I say those are the best movies I've ever seen, I'm not doing the thing where you like pretend something that's kind of bad is actually really good. I'm not pretending. Like, the Terminator movies are seriously good movies, and everyone should just take them seriously. They're worth taking seriously. And specifically, they're worth taking seriously as movies where James Cameron takes things that would be sort of easy to regard as cheap thrills or sort of like gimmicky Hollywood bullshit things, and then actually makes them beautiful. The first Terminator movie is like, on the surface appears to be like a thriller, but there's like startlingly beautiful, hardcore things hidden all over that movie that I think are like super artistic and not only cool, but like cinematically advanced in a way that you wouldn't have to do just to get a thriller made. For instance, in the beginning of the movie, when Arnold Schwarzenegger appears in the 80s, having time traveled from the future, we see Arnold Schwarzenegger like crouching in the midst, in the mist. It's hard to say that. He's like naked and crouching in the mist. And it's night, and there's the mist around him, and you just see it's like the ridiculous nude Arnold Schwarzenegger body, and it looks like a Robert Mapplethorpe photograph. Like, it's clear that one of the things James Cameron was doing with Terminator 1 was he was just sort of using Arnold Schwarzenegger's body as like a classical form. Like the physique of Arnold Schwarzenegger is being used in that movie compositionally as just like a example of human beauty. And the way the shots about him are composed, it's like, it's clear that James Cameron has sort of done unnecessary homework just because he gives a fuck about like conceptions of human beauty, and that's running throughout the first Terminator movie. One thing I like about James Cameron is that he talks about how he thinks beauty for the sake of beauty is an important part of filmmaking. I'm going to come back to this when I go back to talking about why Avatar is the worst movie I've ever seen in my life. But that's a James Cameron quote. Beauty for the sake of beauty is worth sticking in films. Okay, cool. So then other cool things about Terminator 1, just the shot when naked Arnold Schwarzenegger looks out over Los Angeles at night. And somewhere in that city, he has to find and kill Sarah Connor. Right now, he's just a naked robot from the future looking down from the hills down at Los Angeles at night. That's a beautiful shot. It's an arresting shot. It's super eerie. It's super spooky. And it's kind of funny. And by funny, I mean not funny at all, that James Cameron has like compositionally created this beautiful arresting shot of this metropolis at night. And there's a naked robot from the future looking at it. It's like we're looking at a naked robot from the future looking at human civilization. And the whole thing is, just go watch the movie again. It's amazing. That shot, like, it makes you kind of long for and also appreciate the frailty of human creation. It's so fragile and yet so beautiful and yet so expansive. There's shots like that all through Terminator 1. And then, let's not forget, there's a sex scene in Terminator 1. Sarah Connor and Kyle Reese have sex in a motel. And I think some people think that scene is like a cheesy 80s sex scene. It's there because you have to sell movies in the 80s, and the only way to do that is with sex scenes that have frontal nudity. And it is true that the sex scene in Terminator 1 has frontal nudity in it. But I don't consider that to be a sort of gratuitous sex scene. I find the sex scene in Terminator 1 to be weirdly moving. I think it actually really captures the fact that these two lonely people, Sarah Connor, who's being hunted by a robot from the future, and Kyle Reese, who's the sort of weird, twitchy soldier from the future who's been sent back in time to protect her. And I think we're supposed to figure out that he's a virgin. These two people have sex in a motel, and I think the scene captures the loneliness of them and also the realness of them being attracted to each other and being two lonely people. And I just like to point out that the on-screen depiction of that is something that a lot of other directors have tried to do. Directors that have reputations that are like way more artistic than James Cameron, right? Like the idea of two alienated people finally figuring out that they might be in love, and the way they do it is sort of clumsily, alienatedly taking place in this motel, and that the motel is super kitschy and weird. That's like totally something you might expect from a Jim Jarmusch movie or a Sofia Coppola movie, right? The way that weird alienated weirdos try and or fail to have sex. Steven Soderbergh, right? That's like, you have to make one movie like that, and then you're regarded as like an artistic filmmaker for the rest of your life. Except guess what? James Cameron beat all of them. The love scene in Terminator 1 is totally what all those other filmmakers are trying to do, and I personally find it to be more arresting and more sort of surprising in the middle of this movie about being chased by a Terminator robot from the future. So all I'm trying to do here is establish what James Cameron is capable of, and to convince you that it was correct to have high hopes for Avatar when Avatar came out. Sadly, those hopes were dashed because I found Avatar to be close to worthless on a second-to-second basis. And the only reason I'm going to be this harsh is because I love James Cameron and I think he's capable of amazing masterpiece work. Right. So I said before that James Cameron is quoted as saying that beauty for the sake of beauty is like something that matters to him. I don't think there's beauty for the sake of beauty in Avatar. So much of it is like CGI, and it's the kind of CGI that I don't think is beautiful. I mean, I get that a lot of people worked really fucking hard and that it's in 3 dimensions, and then I'm sure they spent a lot of time trying to make it look good. But it still just sort of looks like labored special effects, and none of it has the kind of like visual impact of the shots I just talked about in Terminator 1. And then furthermore, the special effects never sort of, there's never the moment where you see what the point of it was, right? The point of it was just that he wanted to make a 3D movie. Who cares? But there's never the moment where the special effects then kind of hook up to the rest of the world and sort of link up with the rest of the reality. What I'm talking about, of course, is the way special effects work in Terminator 2, the other James Cameron masterpiece. That movie had a huge special effects budget. The villain in Terminator 2 was a liquid metal man, a different robot from the future who could transform into liquid metal. And there were a bunch of fancy special effects shots, some of which now look dated, some of which don't. But there's a moment in Terminator 2 when the liquid metal man has to move through a wall of prison bars. And he moves through the wall of prison bars by half liquefying. He goes into the liquid metal state and then like walks through the bars and then is through them. And that's the special effects shot, the way they show his liquid metal skin moving through the bars. When the special effects shot ends, he starts to move forward and all of a sudden he's stuck. And he looks back and the gun in his hand has been stuck between the bars, and he turns his hand so that the gun can fit through and then keeps moving through. There's this little tiny moment when the liquid metal robot forgets that he has to angle his hand so the gun can move through the bars. Now that's not a special effects shot, but it makes the whole special effects shot that just came that much more memorable and that much more perfect and that much more like hooked up to the world in which it's taking place. It's those kinds of little details that make the special effects on either side of it look more implanted in the world and more real. Guess what is missing completely from any of the special effects shots in Avatar is that exact kind of thing. Because as good as the special effects might be, what we're talking about here is not actually technical execution, where it's like a level of imagination and a level of creativity that is absent. It's just gratuitous 3D special effects the whole time. It looks like you're in a video game or something. There's never any moment when Avatar is like a real world you could live in and feel alive. And then the other gripe is that like there's dumb one-liners in Avatar. And there's a couple dumb one-liners in the Terminator movies, but they're also great one-liners. Now, some of them are iconic. I'll be back, right? That's from Terminator 1. Hasta la vista, baby. That's from Terminator 2. But those aren't even the best lines. There's a line when John Connor, the boy John Connor in Terminator 2 is crying because he's afraid. And in this movie, Arnold Schwarzenegger is a good guy who has to protect him. And he sees that he's crying. Arnold Schwarzenegger is a robot. And he sees that he's crying and he says, "What's wrong with your eyes?" Because he's a robot. And he doesn't understand why the boy is crying. What's wrong with your eyes? Okay, everybody, that's what good screenwriting is. There have been a lot of books written about screenwriting. Sid Field, James McKee with Story, other people whose names I forget. A lot of people have a lot of theories about the 3-act structure and screenwriting school, okay? And how the Aristotelian, what's it called? The the themes that we're supposed to do because of what Aristotle said, all of those screenwriting books are a fucking scam, okay? Because here's all you got to do if you want to write a good screenplay is you have to have a character who's a robot from the future, and that character has to see a boy crying, and then that robot has to have the line, "What's wrong with your eyes?" And if you can do that, then you have a good screenplay, okay? I don't really give a shit about the 3-act structure and all this other bullshit. That means nothing to me, okay? The only thing I care about is if one of your characters is a robot from the future, did you really think about what it would mean for that robot to live in our world? And if one of that robot's jobs is to protect a young boy, did you really think about what the vibe would be? And what if the boy got scared and cried? Well, what would the robot say then? Let's think about it. Well, if what you thought of was that the robot would say, "What's wrong with your eyes? Congratulations, you're a creative person and you have a bunch of good ideas in your head, and all you have to do is be that way when you write your screenplay," right? Guess what the one-liners are like in Avatar? They're not very cool. There's one scene where Sam Worthington is fighting some sort of 3D beetle monster, and he says, "Bring it, bitch." Okay, I hope for anybody watching that that's like, it's clear to you why that's the opposite of cool, right? If "what's wrong with your eyes" is good, then Sam Worthington saying to a beetle monster, "Bring it, bitch," is the opposite of good, okay? So that's the kind of shit you get from Avatar. Then, other people have also criticized Avatar. I'm not the only person to have had objections about it. And I agree with other people's criticisms too, right? Some people have pointed out that the story is really not interesting at all. And in fact, the story has been done 1,000,000 times. It has the same story as Dances with Wolves, for instance. It has the same story as Last of the Mohicans, for instance. In fact, the story's been done so many times that it's been given a name, which is that it's a white man savior story. And there's a bunch of political criticisms that go along with that. I endorse all those criticisms. That none of this is a good look for Avatar either. It's one of only many problems. But yes, you're right. That's also part of the issue here, is that it's a fucking dull story about a guy who saves a bunch of people because he understands their ways more than they themselves do. I don't really care about that. And to be honest with you, people could say that about the Terminator movies too, and they might even be right. But the Terminator movies are operating on so many levels that they can withstand this criticism. I'll give you an example. One of the guys who wrote one of those screenwriting books that's supposed to be a big deal is Sid Field. Okay, a lot of people consider Sid Field to be like the guru of screenwriting. And he said the thing he loves most about Terminator 2, the thing that knocked him dead, is that at the end of that movie, Linda Hamilton's character, Sarah Connor, says that maybe if a robot like Arnold Schwarzenegger can learn to value human life, well, maybe humanity can learn that too. Now, I personally think that's the dumbest line in Terminator 2. They made a whole movie that was really cool and really smart, and by the end of it, it's clear that that was one of the messages. Okay, I personally don't need a movie to have a message. I think that's kind of bad news, actually, but whatever. You make a whole 2-hour movie where the robot says, "What's wrong with your eyes?" and then later it figures out what crying means. By the end, it's very clear that the whole point of this fucking thing was that the robot learned to love. Okay, you don't then need to say right before the movie ends that maybe if a robot can learn to love, humans can learn to love too. Okay, it tells you something about Hollywood's #1 screenwriting guru, that he thinks that's the part of Terminator 2 that's good. That's not the part of Terminator 2 that's good. That's the part of Terminator 2 that's dumb. Okay? Sid Field loves that. Well, guess what? James Cameron knows that Sid Field loved that, and that's exactly what kind of movie Avatar is on a second-to-second basis. There's something in the language of the blue people in the Avatar movie where they have this thing they say that means hello, but it doesn't really mean hello. It means I see you. And when James Cameron won whatever award he won for that movie, that's what he said to all the people that he was thanking. And then he explained that by seeing them, what he really means is that he sees who they are in totality, and he's grateful to that. This is the same fucking problem, right? It's clear to anybody when you say in your acceptance speech that you see the people you're thanking, that you mean it on this deeper sentimental level. Nobody would ever miss that. But the fact that you need to then explain it to everybody, that what you're really saying is that you see them as, you see their souls or whatever fucking thing it is, the only people who would ever feel the need to say that are people who have just made too much money on their movies and have become too comfortable with the idea that Sid Field, the screenwriting guru, has blessed their work. I would say you're on the right track if you write a screenplay and your goal with it is to kill Sid Field. He's already dead. So what you should really be trying to do is to reach him in the afterlife and kill him again so that he's shunted from the afterlife to non-existence. That's what every screenwriter's goal should be, would be to snuff out the immortal spirit of Sid Field who is dead and to reduce that spirit to absolute non-existence. Okay, right, so that's another problem with Avatar. And then lastly, I would say there were very few surprises in Avatar, right? Terminator 1 I already said was surprising because it has that like weirdly moving sex scene in it. Terminator 2, I think, also doesn't really get credit for kind of being as unconventional as it was. Obviously, what I'm talking about is things like Linda Hamilton in that movie. The way Linda Hamilton looks is like kind of amazing. She's like super athletic. Her physical performance in that movie is amazing. The first time she sees Arnold Schwarzenegger, she's running. And then when she sees him, she thinks he's an evil robot. And as she's running, she kind of slows down and starts to sit on the floor. She goes from like a running to a sit out of terror. And that kind of choice, the way she physically as an actor gets there, how she decides like the way my character is going to exhibit pure terror is that I'm weirdly, awkwardly going to go from running to sitting to being afraid. Like that's the kind of perfect and also unusual touch that is what I'm talking about here. But it's not just that. It's also just the female lead of that movie, Linda Hamilton as Sarah Connor, I think is also remarkable for being a woman in a mainstream action movie in the 90s whose appearance is not being made to conform to male gaze expectations of female beauty, right? She's not sort of being made to look like the kind of thing that Hollywood executives think men want to look at. Now, I'm not saying she's not beautiful. I'm not saying that it's unconventional because they made her look bad. But the type of beauty she does have and the way she does look, which I think is beautiful, is just very clearly not bothered with conforming to the sort of Hugh Hefner school of female beauty, which is itself, you know, I think the nicest thing you could say about it is that it's a little bit played out and that it's sort of a predictable choice if you're trying to make a blockbuster in the 90s. That's not what she looks like at all. Speaking of gender roles, I also have to say at this point that I think Terminator 2, for better or for worse, had a big effect on me. And I said before that there was the line in it where the robot asks the boy why he's crying. And then at the end of the movie, the robot has to kill itself, has to make a sacrifice to protect humanity. And before it does that, it says, I know now why you cry, but it's something I can never do. Regardless of whether you think that's a good line or not, I was a young kid when I saw that. And I realized later in life that that sort of became, rightly or not, like my entire model for masculinity. It is the idea that you should be in touch with your feelings. And you should understand crying, and you shouldn't judge it, but you should also be incapable of it. But that doesn't mean you shouldn't feel it. You should understand feelings, and you should even have feelings. It's just that the feelings you have, you should experience them while still being incapable of crying. But that doesn't mean we're going to judge crying. And when other people cry, we're going to be sensitive and compassionate to those people. And we're going to understand why they feel the way they do. It's just that you yourself as a man should be incapable of crying. And the fact that Arnold Schwarzenegger is not a man in that movie, he's a robot from the future, makes no difference. I didn't care about that. He was just so effectual and so cool and so reliable and so powerful in that movie that I was just like, cool, I want to be those things. I want to be this sort of resolute, grim man of pure will, who just sort of perfectly achieves his mission parameters no matter what he's trying to do, and destroys the foes and protects the family. Those are beautiful things I want to be able to do in my life. And if the guy who does those things says sentences like, I understand why humans cry, but it's something I can never do, well, I'll just have to, squeeze my soul into that also. Now, whether that was a good idea or not, I'm going to put that question aside. If you think this is a shortcoming of the Terminator 2 religion, and on the part of the movie you think it got this part wrong, that's fine. It's possible that they did get that wrong. My larger point is that it's a provocative sentence that sticks with you. And even if you disagree with it, it is kind of a very perfect, succinct crystallization of a thing you disagree with. It's a very useful representation of toxic masculinity, right? If you need an example of toxic masculinity, you can very quickly get to your point by saying, well, just think about the way the robot at the end of Terminator 2 says, I know now why you cry, but it's something I can never do. I'm just trying to point out that even if you disagree with it, there's a certain kind of skill in how perfectly it represents the thing you disagree with. I would say that's nowhere evident in Avatar. There's like nothing you can engage with in that movie that is even really interesting to disagree with. So it's just another example of how you get nothing but disappointment from Avatar. And I think the worst things about it are basically all the ways in which it's unlike the Terminator movies. Part of the reason why I'm saying it's the worst movie I've ever seen. Or part of the reason why I'm saying it's worse than literally every other film that's ever been beamed into my eyeballs, including a bunch of shit that was so bad I don't even remember it, is because of what a squandered opportunity it was. Right, so what do I have to do now? Oh, right, I got to talk about the second worst movie I've ever seen. Yeah, I guess it might. I'm trying to think about movies I saw that I didn't like. I don't really remember all the movies I saw. But I guess I would say Force Awakens, that movie to me felt like it had zero new ideas and zero surprises. Everyone talks about how even the people who like that movie say they like it even though it was a total retread of Star Wars 4. Even people who think Force Awakens was cool, they're okay with the fact that it was just the same as another movie they liked. I just like to point out that's how oppressed these Star Wars fans are, right? They've been fed so much shit that if they just now get a movie that's very cynically plagiarizing a movie they've already seen, they'll be like, thank you for this mercy. And personally, I used to be a Star Wars fan. I had the toys as a kid. I saved up my allowance to buy the Star Wars encyclopedia. You know what I mean? I was DTF. But if being a Star Wars fan means that I got to say, okay, thanks for making me see a movie that I already fucking saw, well, guess what? I'm not going to do that. And then check out this comment, Dragon Ball Z movie. I never saw that. Was that movie where you think that's like the third worst movie ever made? After Avatar, then Star Wars 7, and you think it could be Dragon Ball Z? It would make sense to me. I'm really fast running out of ideas here. Maybe I could like Google some movies that have been made, and I could try to put them in my list. Let's do that right now. I'm going to Google the words movies that have been made. Movies that have been made. You want to type it right so that Google understands. How many movies have been made? That's not exactly what I'm interested in. List of films. Perfect. List of films, Wikipedia. That's exactly right. Alphabetical indices by year, by award, by revenue, by setting, by country of origin, by genre. There's a level of detail here that I wasn't prepared for. By type of character, Wikipedia, don't overthink it. Just give us the fucking... It's either alphabetical or by year. Those are the two ways to do it. Okay, a bunch of these are going to be movies I've never fucking heard of, right? There was a movie in 1876. What was that? That was called, Wow, I Think Our Country's About to Get Fucked Up. The decade of the 1870s in film involved some significant events. French astronomer Pierre Janssen used his photographic revolver to photograph the transit of the planet Venus across the sun. That's definitely not the fourth worst movie ever made. I haven't seen it, but it sounds like it might be cool. In 1879, American George Eastman invented an emulsion coating machine which enables the mass production of photographic dry plates. Yeah, well, I would say that it was not super helpful. It was sort of, it was a level of granular detail that was kind of worthless. It's A Wonderful Life. Thank you for that suggestion. Yeah, where's that? I don't know. I haven't seen it in a long time. I think I'm going to do the cop-out and just stick it in the middle of the pack. You know, it's definitely worse than the Terminators, that's for sure. It's definitely better than Star Wars 7. And then somewhere in the middle of there is like another 100 million movies. So let's say that It's a Wonderful Life. I'm going to say that's like number 40,600. That's how good that movie is. All right. Let's move to the top. I guess you guys probably thought that the best movie I ever saw was going to be Terminator 1 and Terminator 2. And maybe they are. But I'm going to say there's a movie I like even more than those. You want to know what my number one favorite movie of all time is I'm going to say Goodfellas. This is a movie from the early 90s, directed by Martin Scorsese. It's about gangsters. This is a movie where Joe Pesci kills a man by stomping on his face with boots. That's the kind of movie we're talking about. There are a couple of things I like about this movie. One is that it's anti-Sid Field. Remember Sid Field? He's the guy who sort of explained how to write a screenplay and how it's supposed to have 3 acts, and there's supposed to be like plot points and an inciting action, and it's supposed to have themes. Goodfellas is like extremely anti-Sid Field. That's my favorite thing about it. There's like no 3-act structure. There's no sort of like, oh, this is the moment when the character figures out that he has to go get the lightsaber back to Luke Skywalker, right? It's just one scene after the next, a bunch of shit happens, and each scene is so perfectly fascinating that you don't even care. Right? The reason I like Goodfellas is that it kind of proves that there's a level above this 3-act structure. You can make a movie that's so fascinating that no one gives a shit if it has a 3-act structure or not. And that's the level that I think is cool, right? Goodfellas, the movie just starts with this kid hanging out with a bunch of gangsters, and then one thing happens after the next, and it's just another thing, and each one is incredible, right? There's a scene where he's become a gangster, and he's hanging out with his gangster friends, and Joe Pesci tells a funny story, and then everybody laughs, and the star of the movie, Ray Liotta, says, "Wow, you're funny." And then Joe Pesci says, what do you mean funny? What do you mean? And Ray Liotta's like, no, I just mean like the way you tell a story is funny. And Joe Pesci's like, no, I don't know what you mean. I'm funny how? Like a clown? Like I amuse you? And then somebody else tries to stick up for Ray Liotta. He's like, no, you got it all wrong. He just meant. He's like, no. Let the kid talk. He knows what he said. I don't. Maybe it's me. Maybe I'm fucked up or something. Tell me what you meant when you said I was funny. And now Ray Liotta's like a little bit scared because Joe Pesci's the guy who kills a man by stomping on his face with a boot. So this might not end well. Who knows how this is gonna end? And Ray Liotta's like, I just think the way you say things is funny. And then the guy's like I amuse you? Like, what's so funny about me? Why? How come I'm funny? And then finally, right when you think this could be it, Ray Liotta's like, he realizes that Joe Pesci was just fucking with him, and the whole thing was a joke. And everybody starts laughing more insanely than they were before. I think about that scene every single day. Every single day I wake up, I think about that scene. And sometimes I'll rewatch it dysfunctionally on YouTube over and over and over again. I think it's really amazing, that scene. And I think it really sort of perfectly encapsulates, the struggle. Because it's funny to be funny, but then what if that comes at some terrible price? What if being funny makes you a not serious person? And what if the more funny you are, the more people don't take you seriously? That's something I worry about all the time as a professional comedian. And sometimes I dread life choices I've made if they've resulted in me being regarded as non-serious. That's definitely something I worry about. The possibility that by ever being funny once in my life, I sacrificed the chance to be serious. I used to talk about this with my therapist all the time, and she would say, well, what about the fact that Joe Pesci is kidding the whole time he says that? It's all a joke when he says it. So what about that? And I would say all that does is add a level of ironic detachment that makes the whole thing too hard for me to think about, and sort of is no resolution whatsoever. Okay, so it's the movie is just like that. It's just like scene after scene after scene of like really fascinating shit like that. I guess some people think that it's kind of violent and macho and dumb. I would say that it is those things, but that it has a sort of critical engagement with those things. And then I guess other people would say that no one really cares about engaging critically with those things anymore because we've engaged enough. And those people might be right. Those people might be right. You're talking to a guy who puts Terminator 1 and 2 in the top 3 movies ever made. And the only movie that's better than those movies, according to this guy, is a movie where a guy kills another guy by stomping on his face with a bunch of boots in a restaurant in the 70s. So, you know, maybe you don't want to listen to me, right? Maybe when I went live, maybe this is not the Instagram thing you need to be watching, and maybe I don't really have the answers for you. That's entirely possible. But since I was asked to rank all the movies I've ever seen in my life from worst to best, that's how I would say it is best, is Goodfellas. It's not just because of the scene about do you think I'm funny. There's a million other things about that movie that are incredible. I also think that Ray Liotta is underrated as an actor in that movie. I think sort of people are too comfortable thinking that Ray Liotta was just a cool guy who played a cool guy in a movie. I think he was doing way more than that. For instance, there's a scene in the end of the movie when he rats out all his friends in court. He cooperates with the FBI to not have to go to jail. And in so doing, he has to betray all of his gangster peers. And there's scenes in court where he has to point to the other people that he's betraying. And these are people that, you know, he considered his loved ones in many ways. And these are people who formed him. These were the men who formed him. And he has to point to them and has to say, yeah, that's the guy, he did it. And that's the other guy, he did it. And I think the look in Ray Liotta's eyes when he does that is good acting. He's not just like, he's not just like, this is the part of the movie where I do the bad thing and I'm the thing that I hate, right? That's how Sid Field would do it. If Sid Field was writing the script, he would be like, at this moment in the movie, this should be the look on Ray Liotta's face. But Sid Field didn't write that movie. That's why it's good. And instead, you can see that he's still Ray Liotta. He's still the guy he always was. He's just fundamentally a guy who goes along to get along. That's it. He didn't learn anything. He didn't become a different thing. This was always what he was. And this is why he did as well in the Mafia as he did. I think this is why the movie is not ultimately a glorification of the Mafias, because it's saying ultimately, if you really want to skate through it all and get away with it all and make a bunch of money and have the things you want and not have to pay for any of the consequences ever, then what you got to do is betray all your best friends with zero compunction. And you can see him do it. You can see that it's not that he's a totally, like, he has no moral sense at all that what he's doing is wrong. You can see that he knows that it's wrong, but he's kind of doing it anyway to take the easy way out. And all that is here. Right? The movie does have voiceover, but the voiceover isn't saying what I just said. That would be that would be a Sid Field movie. There's another screenwriting guy, McKee, who wrote the book called Story. He appears in the movie Adaptation. The Charlie Kaufman, the screenwriter, is a character in that movie. He goes to a lecture by a screenwriting guru. It's this man. And this guy says in the lecture in the movie, voiceover is cheap. Voiceover is for lazy screenwriters. Voiceover is dumb. Well, obviously, that's an oversimplification. It's not. If that was true, then the voiceover in Goodfellas would say things like, and at that moment, when I pointed at Paul Sorvino, that's when I realized who I really was. But that's not what the voiceover says. The voiceover is saying other shit that's funny and cool and adds a layer of sort of ironic detachment in the classic sense of irony. I don't mean like Chuck Klosterman irony, where you sort of say that Van Halen is the greatest band of all time, but you're a little bit saying it to be funny. That's not what I mean. I mean the sense of irony where you know things the characters don't, or maybe the characters know things you don't. Like irony in the sense that there's a disconnect between what you know and what you say, or what the characters say and what you know, or what you say and what the characters know. So that is the sense of irony that is being added to the Goodfellas narration. Right? It's making the movie more complicated. It's not just him saying dumb stuff like the narration at the end of Terminator 2, where Sarah Connor says that maybe if a robot can learn to love, we can learn to love. That's why Terminator 2 is number 3 on my list of the greatest movies ever made. Number 1 is the movie where the voiceover, instead of reducing it to a dumb message that Sid Field would like, elevates it to something that is unrecognizable to the Sid Field School of Screenwriting. Right. So my larger point here was just that I think Ray Liotta's performance in that movie is underrated. There's the look in his eyes that adds layers of meaning when he has to point to the people in court that I think worse filmmakers would have relegated to lines of dialogue or even worse narration. There's a bunch of stuff. Oh, right, and here's the other thing about Goodfellas that I love. The scene I already talked about when Joe Pesci says, well, what's so funny about me? And they think he's about to kill Ray Liotta, but then they find out that he's joking, and they all laugh really hard. Their laughter is grotesque. If you rewatch that scene, the way they all laugh is ghoulish and horrific. It's like insane laughter. It's unpleasant. It's like extremely grating. It almost seems like they're doing bad acting and that they're bad at acting at laughing. But I actually don't think that's what it is. I think what's happening there is that we're seeing that like even these guys' ability to laugh is sort of evil and stunted. That like even their laughter, which is, one of the quintessentially human behaviors, is warped for these guys. And that scene is early in the movie. It's like you sort of have to rewatch it to be sensitive to this. But it's another reason why I think the movie is not just a glorification of the mafia. The movie absolutely does capture the sexy, charismatic appeal of being in the mafia. And when you watch it, it makes you feel like, wow, if I was in the mafia, this is how I would feel. There's a scene where Ray Liotta takes his girlfriend, played by Lorraine Bracco, into the Copacabana, and he goes in the back of the Copacabana instead of waiting online in the front, and he just bribes a bunch of people. And it's a one-take shot where he's going in the back of the club, and you follow him down the steps, and he bribes the first guy, and then he walks through a bunch of hallways, he bribes them, and then he's going through the kitchen, and he's going through all the other places you're not supposed to go. It's one shot, and then he finally gets into the club, and there's a line of people, and he's in front of the line, and the owner of the club gives him a little table right in the front, and he doesn't have to wait at all. Just the way that whole thing is shot, it's like you did it. It's like you're in the mafia, and these people are treating you that way. And the movie absolutely does capture the psychological experience of that in a way that is absolutely intoxicating and seductive. And I think that's why it's easy to think the movie is just a glorification of being in the mafia. And maybe it is, maybe those people are right. But I think the movie's more complicated than that. And as expertly as it does capture the sex appeal of it all, it then ends with this depiction of the fact that if you want to do that, the best case scenario for you is that you betray your friends and then you live the rest of your life sort of unhappily in the suburbs as like an anonymous schmuck. So that's what I think is the best movie of all time. And if you want to stay in touch with me, you should follow me on Instagram. My Instagram is called Cyber Attack World. Cyber Attack World. Because I'm also a musician, and my musician name is Cyber Attack because my music is edgy and digital, just like a act of electronic terrorism. Great. Well, thank you. I hope you learned something.